as we look to the agenda for 2020 and beyond, little did we all know that in Wuhan, something so small was going to have such a fundamental and enormous impact on the world, our industry, and our people. On the 1st of January, our industry moved into a new regime of low-sulfur fuels. Much work had been done in the preceding year to ensure a smooth implementation of these very major regulations. Not wishing to preempt our discussions today, but we were pleased to note that Phase 1 has gone reasonably well. As we move towards 1st of March, when the transition period was to come to an end, the implications of COVID-19 outbreak were only just beginning to become apparent. Demand for marine fuel dropped significantly as exports from China reduced sharply. The price differential that many had factored into their decisions to go the low-sulfur fuel route, or LNG, or exhaust cleaning gas systems, was diminishing. Then, with the collapse of discussions among OPEC members, we witnessed crude prices fall to nearly $11 per barrel, having been over 60 6 months before. In normal times, the oil price fluctuation would have been front center of our minds, but we were concerned about a new challenge, concerned about the potential impact of the COVID-19 outbreak on the global economy, let alone on the shipping sector. I remember writing at the beginning of the year to the president of the Chinese Shipowners Association to express on behalf of the ICS our sincere support and sympathy to the Chinese shipping community. We are and always will be stronger together.
We are now going to move on to the IMO 2020 part of this webinar. It was something that Esben touched upon there. A question and answer session. Just to very briefly set the scene on discussions for the IMO 2020 regulation. I'm sure you're all very aware of it and know about it. But obviously it came into force on January 1, mandating the use of 0.5% less or low sulfur fuels, or the use of exhaust gas cleaning systems to remove that sulfur. It was described by our keynote speaker today, probably about a year ago now, as a once in 100 years change for the shipping industry. And there were some very major concerns for both whether the industry itself would be ready and whether the fuel supply chain would be ready for this with the new very low sulfur fuels and so forth. Now, despite those concerns of disruption to world trade on the date of 1 January 2020 passed, fortunately, without any major incident, and I think that's a credit to how well the industry had prepared itself. But you did see the price of very low sulfur fuel oil skyrocket to over $750 per ton in the late January. However, the subsequent crash of the oil price has seen this come down to levels of a third of that sometimes. And currently, VLSFO prices are around $335 per ton when I checked it earlier today. But that has been said, while the 1 January date passed without major incident, that does not mean that the switch to low sulfur fuels has been all plain sailing, and there haven't been any issues. And the industry has continued to learn about the new fuels it's using and the way that it now has to operate.
Yeah, 2020 was a very anticipated event for the marine industry. And it's fair to say, and in line with what has been mentioned as well, that the industry has shown tremendous resilience, has been able to cope with the fuels very well. And if we look at the statistics that we have from the marine fuels pre-2020, post-2020, we've actually seen that the amount of off-spec fuels that were delivered in the first 5 months of this year did not really materially increase. In fact, actually slightly decreased from the one in 2019. To give you an idea, about 4% or slightly above 4% is off specification. And again, within that overall aggregate filter of off-spec fuels, there's some very interesting conclusions one can draw. For example, before the 1st of January 2020, the industry was anticipating a spike of high cat fine fuels in these very low sulfur fuels because of the blending that would take place to meet the sulfur requirements. But of that 4% that was off-spec, only 3% of that off-spec total was attributed to cat fines, aluminium and silicon. Over 50% of all off-specs were related to TSP. And that leads us to what we actually did predict. We did have this inkling that the fuels would become more paraffinic in nature, hence that we've seen a sharp increase in off-spec TSPs of these new fuels as opposed to conventionally high sulfur fuel oils, which only about 6% of such fuels had TSP or stability-related issues. So in summary, I think the industry has coped very well. I think the industry also understood very well that in order to be successful, the crew had to know how to use these fuel, and through the use of effective ship implementation plan developments, has done exceedingly well in handling such fuels. And yeah, that's pretty much the summary that I would like to give at this stage, Marcus. Thank you.
IMO 2020 is indeed a very important stage that is taking the shipping industry into a new era. Myself is a shipping lawyer, and I specialize in shipping, among other things. And I totally agree with what Absence has said, that is, the world cannot go without shipping. So let me just summarize what I observed in the past few months as to what IMO 2020 has brought along so far as the legal perspective is concerned. Now, we talk about scrubbers, we talk about compliant fuel oil, we talk about the crush of the crude oil price, all these things. I recall them very vividly. I recall sitting in front of the TV on the early morning of the 9th of March, watching how the US stock market collapsed, and then how the trade was suspended twice on that day. And then subsequently, we have the crush of the crude oil. All these are connected to a certain extent with shipping because it is very closely connected with trading and international economy. Now, we talk about all these things, seafarers, scrubbers, oil price, but I think we must all remember and not to lose sight about that. IMO 2020 is in fact a piece of law. It's an international convention. So for all those contracting states who have ratified them by means of national law or just simply by adopting the convention, they are enforcing a piece of international law, which is closely connected with the everyday operation of shipping. Now, talking about law, if it is a piece of law, then the first thing must come to our mind is that the government or the administration are entitled to enforce them.
Since the implementation of new sulfur cap regulations from 1st January 2020, in last 6 months, the industry has experienced many cases of main engine poor liner conditions, collapsed piston rings, extreme wear rates, and consequential scuffing. Scuffing of liner and wear down of piston rings can be attributed to single or a combination of reasons like fuel quality, its handling and treatment, wrong selection of cylinder oil, and feed rate not optimized. In most of the cases, the fuel has been found to meet 8217 specification as been echoed by Douglas when he was giving a presentation. And there is no set pattern on the breakdown of main engine, and even engine makers have not yet given any concrete root cause analysis for such trouble. But it is better to analyze the breakdown, and we focus on 3 important items. That is the cylinder oil and its feed rate, condition of piston rings, and the cylinder liner. Coming to the cylinder oil and feed rate, with regards to the cylinder lubrication, challenges have been arisen as there is no single grade of cylinder lube oil in the oil that is suitable for VLSFO. The engine makers require vessels to use cylinder oil with grades from TBN 40 to TBN 70. TBN 40 oil is low in base number and low in detergency. TBN 70 is high in base number and has got high detergency. And base number is the ability to neutralize the acid formation due to sulfur in fuel. Detergency is the ability to keep the piston and rings clean. Continuous usage of high BN can lead to excessive deposits of additives like calcium, and it can lead to liner polishing. On the other hand, continuous usage of low BN oil can cause dirty piston rings, and this can also cause wear down of liner and piston rings. Hence, it is important to regularly inspect the physical condition of piston rings and liners to optimize the feed rate and TBN of cylinder oil.